that's okay. You know, I'll try to talk louder. Maybe that has something to do with it. But in any event, the Covett Seal versus Great Neck case is an important case because the parents truly hold religious beliefs contrary to the practice of vaccinating. The mother is a minister. They live and serve God every day in their life and their children. And the district court, the Eastern District of New York, the court held that their beliefs were philosophical and not religious. And I respect the court's opinion, and I believe the judge truly thinks that is correct, but the facts do not bear that out. So we're eager to get forward on that appeal. Another case in the state Supreme Court here in Rockland was Doe versus Archdiocese. I tried that last month, and we're waiting for an opinion of the court. That was an important case, too, because we had a Catholic family here in New York that was objecting to the injection of disease into their body on various religious grounds, one of them being that they had a pro-life position and they did not want to use fetal cell lines from aborted tissue. And without getting, too much into the detail, the Archdiocese here in New York said, sorry, you have to inject those vaccines in order to attend a Catholic school. And furthermore, because the couple had used in vitro fertilization, the Archdiocese basically said that their pro-life position was not correct. If I can tell you, that was the most outrageous argument I had ever heard, the Catholic Church actually requiring Catholics to inject shots that contain these fetal cells. It's unbelievable. So I'm fairly confident there that the court will grant this family the exemption and allow these parents, the children, to attend the Catholic school. And I think it will set an extraordinary precedent and probably will make its way to the Supreme Court of the United States as well. So from my little sandy, storm-torn office here on the banks of the Hudson River, we're rocking the world, rocking the court, and taking steps to make a change. And in many ways, it's a kick in the knee because to fight the pharmaceutical, to fight individuals like Bill Gates, the money, the resources, the lack of information, the lack of disclosure is unbelievable. It's insurmountable. However, the Constitution is clear. We have religious systems in this.
I want to make a really important point here. And for those of you who have just joined us, our guest is vaccine attorney Patricia Finn. She's fighting our fight, and we're fighting it right along with her. She said from the banks of the storm-torn Hudson, she's changing history and changing the world. There is no place where you are that you cannot change history from. You don't have to be an attorney. You don't have to be an expert in the field that concerns you. But indeed, you, by becoming an active source of information and taking action, can in fact change the world. I want you to go to tinyurl.com/vaccine refuser. I want you to take the Vaccine Refusers Pledge. It's simple, it's a few sentences, and it says, I own my body and I'm not putting poison into it. The vaccines don't work. They are dangerous. That's been known. The focus of the show today includes the UK Freedom of Information Act information that shows that they have known that vaccines don't work, cause disease, are dangerous, and shorten lifespans for more than 30 years. And we'll talk about the CDC in this regard in the United States and the fact that they know it too. And it is time for all of us to step up to the line in the sand that we draw and say, no more. You will not inject poison into my body and my baby's body. You do not own my body. I do. And there will be no more of this dangerous, deadly, deceitful stratagem to kill me and the people that the higher ups in the echelon want to get rid of. No more. This will no longer happen. And the only way that history will be changed, so that history will look back on what we have done for 200 years and more, to say how barbaric, how sad, and how glad we are that we don't do this anymore, in just the same way that history looks back on the fact that the Romans not only made their aqueduct piping of lead because it was easily bent, formed, and molded, but they also, because lead has a sweet taste, shaved lead into their beverages and onto their food. And the world says, my God, how incredibly, tragically ignorant and disastrous. That's what should be said about vaccines. My God, how incredibly ignorant and disastrous and evil. Thank God we no longer face that kind of insanity. Now it's time for our generations, our awareness, our computer fingers, our freedom mice to make that change. You know the Gandhian saying, be the change you wish to see, be the change you wish to be. No more. I am a vaccine refuser. If you are a vaccine refuser, either because you know that they're dangerous and don't work, or because you don't want to be forced to do anything because you believe in the sovereignty of your own body, if you are indeed a sovereign in your own skin, and I want to talk about the law about sovereignty with our two attorney guests today, or one host, one guest, then it's time to take the Vaccine Refusers Pledge. And having taken it, it's then time to share it with everyone you know. And I mean everyone, because we're all in this genocide together. And I'd like to get...
I think it would be a great idea, Dr. Rima, for all of us to do just that, to take that tiny URL and post it on Facebook and Twitter and say, I am a vaccine refuser. I am a vaccine refuser, and proud of it.
And right? I have a video which is on the page that you can go to the link at tinyurl.com. Oh, I did that wrong. tinyurl.com/vaccine refuser. I'll type it again. Patty, what do you think? Our guest, by the way, is Patty Finn. For those people who are joining us, you need to know that. She's a very important lady and has suffered slings and arrows of outrageous retribution for her brave stand on vaccines. What do you think about what I've said about the time has come to say no more?
Well, I agree, and I think that the voice of those who say no more is increasing, and it's becoming so loud, and there's so many vehicles now available for people to express their desires not to vaccinate, like your radio show, the work I'm doing, the work that others are doing around the world. I mean, nobody is really looking at us as quacky lawyers or doctors anymore. They're really starting to pause and listen. And as I had mentioned previously, on an individual level, people have rights over their bodies. They have rights to live in peace and without intrusion into their religion and personal life, and the Constitution protects against that. The vaccines, on a global level as well, are very, very dangerous. I mean, the government wants us all to line up and inject and not ask any questions. Well, there's numerous safety concerns about the shots. Where are they coming from? Who's making them? Some of the pharmaceutical companies have been fined for failing to follow protocol and safety standards? And what if the vaccines are intercepted? Here in New York, for example, there isn't a Duane Reade or a CVS that you walk into that over the microphone or the audio there, they're asking you to get a shot and a vaccine. Well, who knows? Where did these shots come from? And I don't want to. Or McDonald's in Texas, they were offering both a burger and an H1N1 vaccine.
God. Both are equally toxic.
Both, yeah, hear that? Both are equally toxic. Good point, Dr. Rima.
The point is that, the practice of mixing our food with disease, or misting people in the pharmacy counter and then cutting them loose in the makeup area of the same store without any regard to where the needle is going, what diseases are in there, and it actually could trigger a pandemic.
Indeed, especially if they're using the spray vaccine, which does use a live virus and makes the person who receives it an infectious agent for 20 days or more. Is that correct, doctor?
And then inject or
yes.
doctors and then sending them to work in hospitals or with the infirmed or the elderly as a requirement of employment. If you're a healthcare worker, the pressure to get the experimental H1N1 and flu vaccine is incredible. And if you refuse, you lose your job. So what happens? They get misted, and then they're sent onto the floor to work. And it's a petri dish, and it could actually backfire. So, my objections to vaccine on the legal basis is definitely based on bodily autonomy and religious freedom and those rights protected in the Bill of Rights.
I agree entirely with you, Counsel, but when you said backfired, is it a backfiring or is it intentional? There are people who understand, as Bill Gates said, as that statistician from the World Bank said, that vaccines are a population reduction method. And that means that they're intended to kill, at least by those people. So it seems to me that we are beginning to see that the medical profession is becoming an instrument of state-mediated death. Dr. Rima tells the story of her 96-year-old father who was in good health until he went to the hospital and was rapidly dead. Just a day ago or two, our dear friend Sherry Edwards, the founder of Human Bioacoustics, let me know that her Aunt June, who we all loved, she was a regular fixture at the annual Bioacoustics Conference, was without electricity and went to a hospital as a shelter. They had opened the hospital as a shelter for the elderly. And she got there, and within a day, she was in IC, intensive care, without food, without water, and she was dead 2 days later. This woman was in good health before she went to the hospital. I think we're seeing, and this is something that's really important, we established something called the Health Keeper's Oath. It was certainly inspired by the Oath Keepers, but is independent of that. And the Health Keeper's Oath is basically a promise, a pledge that doctors like Dr. Rima and others have taken, that they will not become instruments of state-mediated mega-death. I think that we are seeing a development of a strategy by the elite to deal with some of the extraordinary financial disaster that they've caused by their fiat system, fiat food, fiat money, and fiat drugs, I guess, by rapidly helping the elderly to die faster. And I think that we're going to see that happening.
It's not a speculation. It is a fact. Let's start with the fact that the Edinburgh Plan is a eugenics plan against the elderly, and it is now officially stated in the UK, which seems to be becoming a model for the worst kind of fascism. It is officially recognized that 20% of the deaths that occurred in the UK last year were caused under the Edinburgh Plan, in which doctors, without oversight and without the will of the family or the individual being involved, have the right to decide who lives and who dies, and can carry out lethal procedures for the elderly if the elderly are anticipated by the doctor to die within 1 year. So they lop off a year of your life at their discretion. The Edinburgh Plan, the architect of the Edinburgh Plan was one of the chief architects of Obamacare, and the commission in Washington, which decides who gets what care, whether they're worthwhile to invest the cost of care in, or whether they're old people who, or inconvenient people who have, as the Germans said in 1922, lives not worth living, and therefore are killed, as my father was killed. My father was killed by a doctor who quite literally murdered him. Those are not exaggerated words, and I can tell that story if it's relevant. The Edinburgh Plan is part of Obamacare. Now, that means that if you're perceived as not particularly valuable or particularly undesirable, once you get into a hospital, after you get all your shots injected into your body at once, in order to, quote, bring you up to date on your vaccines before you can receive care, and just think about that, then anything that happens to you under the Obamacare plan may in fact be happening to you under the Edinburgh pathway, as they call it. This is disastrous in the extreme. And when you consider that 50% of the drugs that the FDA approves for general use in the population are withdrawn within 5 years because they're too toxic, because they cause too many deaths. And when you consider the whitewash going on about vaccines that's been going on since Eli Lilly first introduced thimerosal in 1922 with FDA approval by injecting thimerosal, 50% mercury by weight, into 11 comatose patients who had spinal meningitis. Every single one of them died, and it was reported out to the FDA as safe because, and I quote, all of the patients would have died anyway. And the FDA accepted it because the FDA is an agency of the pharmaceutical and agribiz conglomerates. When you consider that, and you consider that the intention of the mega organizations, including the United Nations, which now owns every drop of potable water in the United States thanks to an executive order 1 week before the election, and now controls our military thanks to an executive order immediately after Obama's first election. And this is not about Obama. This is about us and the problems we face. When you consider all of these facts, if you don't believe that it is time to act now through legal action, through taking the vaccine refusers pledge, through saying no to dangerous drugs, through becoming a mouse warrior on our new website, www.savemylifedrrima.com. I will type that, www.savemylifedrrima.com. If you don't believe these things, then you need a new toothpaste.
Not enough fluoride in you.
Not enough fluoride, or too much fluoride. I'd like to ask our two brave attorneys, Patricia Finn and, of course, my co-host Ralph Fusatola, to talk to us about the legal reasoning that makes us think that we do have sovereignty over our bodies.
Well, first of all, it's Patricia Finn who's the brave attorney. I'm retired, although I'm busier than ever in my life in my consulting and my work as a trustee of the foundation. But she is there literally on the battle line. And so she is the brave lady. I am, the elder statesman who would like to stay alive a long time to come. Sovereignty, personal sovereignty. It goes back to basic philosophy, if you will. Let's be a philosopher here instead of a lawyer. There is a primary distinction in reality. And of course, the will to power seeks to ignore and avoid reality. The powers that be, in their hubris, think that they can bend reality to their will anytime in any way. The great philosopher Ludwig von Mises, in the concluding paragraph to his mega work, Human Action, says there are three types of limitations on human action, and he discusses them. The physiological, the psychological, and the economic, and it's really the attempt to negate reality, to avoid the real world around them, to make reality conform to their will that we see being played out. And when these games are played out, they sometimes end up with atomic bombs blowing up cities, with General Sherman burning his way to the coast, with the usual behavior of elites, which is to, one more bullet through someone's brain and utopia will happen. It's just one more. And it goes on and on and on. And we're moving in the direction of one of those mega spasms that our species seems to engage in. It is true, as Mises pointed out, that only individuals think, and I would say only individuals feel, that only individuals plan, and only individuals can undertake action, human action. And that's exactly what we're dealing with here. We're dealing with people who are acting and pretending that they're not. I'm not doing it. It's not my hand pushing the needle into your arm. It is the majesty of the state. Indeed. So from a legal standpoint, we got to start with reality. And the reality is that only people exist, only individuals. There are no classes, there are no corporations, there are no nations, there are no governments. There are only individuals. And they're acting. And some of them are acting as real actors, as individuals, and some of them are pretending something else. And it is that pretense that has resulted in thousands of years of human misery. So I look at it from a philosophical viewpoint.
Very well said. And Patty, what in our statutes or our legal system gives us sovereignty over our own bodies?
Well, let me just back up a little bit. I think everything that Ralph said is correct. I think that humans, no matter how hard we try or how hard we aspire, we end up doing ourselves in. And we've seen that failure over and over again throughout history, particularly when it comes to government. I think, though, the United States is different in that we have a constitution. And the most important part of the Constitution is the due process requirement, because the law, medicine, and education, and pretty much food and water, these processes that we implement to manage them, manage our resources, the way we treat each other and engage with each other, it's just prone to abuse. And the due process clause protects against that. It's inherent fundamental fairness that you may have a law, you may have a statute, you may have a practice, but if it's unfair, it violates due process. If you're being treated differently than others, it violates equal protection if there's no reason for it. So, just a basic day-to-day legal courtroom analysis of the subject of vaccinations, it's violating the due process rights of people to exercise their religious freedoms, enjoy bodily autonomy, and the other aspects of their lives that vaccines and other questionable medical treatments intervene. So for me, I know personally there is no way that I could ever let go of the belief that the government and the law, even though they are often defective, are balanced, remedied, and corrected by the Due Process Clause. You have a right in this country to be treated fairly. And if you're being injured by something, then you're not being treated fairly. So that's really where the rights come. As for specific statutory exemptions, for example, in New York and in most states, except for West Virginia and Mississippi, the law requires or the law allows for an exemption of vaccines to go to school if you have religious or medical reasons. So that's a statutory right. You also have constitutional rights, First, Ninth, 14th Amendment rights to avoid vaccines, and in particular if you're denied your statutory exemption. It's interesting what's going on in West Virginia right now is West Virginia and Mississippi do not allow for a religious exemption from vaccines. And the case that I had mentioned that went before the Supreme Court last year, although denied certiorari, involved a West Virginia mom who would not immunize her young child. It was in the case of Workman versus Mingo County, West Virginia. And in that case, the mom had both medical and religious reasons as to why she did not want to vaccinate. Her doctor gave her a medical exemption and said, you should not vaccinate your child. It's contrary to her health. It was reviewed by the public health department. Actually, they reviewed it and then they re-reviewed it because the county health official granted the exemption. And then the state came in and said, no, we're going to look at it and we're going to deny it. So here you had a state actor overruling both their county health officer and this kid's doctor. This kid's pediatrician said no, or it was his doctor or her doctor, no, this child should not have a shot. But here the state is saying, sorry, you have to get it. The mom also had religious beliefs. She was a Pentecostal Baptist, and she believed two things. She believed it was wrong to violate the doctor's advice because the doctor had told her not to vaccinate. And as a Christian, she objected to the injection of disease into an otherwise healthy body. So I'm telling you all about what's going on in West Virginia because it's really the Aberdeen proving ground right now as to what's going to happen. In the case that I argued, Workman versus Mingo County, the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals ruled that it was up to the legislature. And I argued the legislature was silent as to religion and thus unconstitutional, but the court refused that argument. So, West Virginia is a tough place. Mississippi is a tough place. New York is a tough place because we have such a huge concentration of pharmaceutical companies employing people in New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut. And in New Jersey, for example, you're required to get more vaccines than anywhere else in the entire world. And it's also the headquarters of Merck Pharmaceutical. So
and probably the state with the highest level of autism in the country at this point, isn't it?
Oh, you know what? It may be.
If not the highest, certainly very close. Yes, indeed.
Very, very scary stuff. But I do want to point out, though, in the United States, absent a really narrow circumstance, there are no laws anyway making vaccines mandatory. There are some broad allowances to the government. For example, if there's a terrorist threat or some other kind of threat, the government could order an injection, and H1N1 was heading in that direction.
Yes. And if it wasn't for massive pushback by us,
I was just going to say.
3.5 million emails got sent to state and national legislators by people who were saying, I will not take that unsafe, unproven vaccine. And that was a really important act, and one we need to remind people about. In 2009, we stopped the swine flu vaccine panic, which would have led, in the opinion of some doctors, like Dr. Rima, I suspect, to the swine flu pandemic. Am I right about that, Dr. Rima?
Absolutely, absolutely. Um, the way the vaccines are constructed, they will create dissemination points in vaccinated people. And if you read the CDC's own literature, one of the best places to go for anti-vaccine science is the CDC's website, because they put up the statements that they acknowledge, and then the public policy simply ignores those statements. For example, polio. When you talk about anti-vaccine sentiment, when you talk about anti-vaccine science, when you talk about vaccine refuser, people always say, invariably, well, what about polio? And the fact is, if you go to the CDC's website on polio, it says the principal cause of polio is polio vaccination, the polio vaccine. And in India, last year, 47,000 children developed polio following vaccination with the monovalent polio vaccine. The multivalent polio vaccine, I believe it's quadrivalent, is even more dangerous. And yet the Dalai Lama, and let's think a little more carefully about our reverence for the Dalai Lama, folks. The Dalai Lama initiated the government of India's tetravalent vaccine, polio vaccine program by vaccinating 2 children. I don't believe that the Dalai Lama has taken training as an EMT, a nurse, or a doctor, but hey, he wears a robe. The Dalai Lama vaccinated 2 children to initiate the tetravalent polio vaccine program. How many, and of course Buddhism strictly forbids the introduction of toxins into the body and forbids the compulsion of anyone to do anything. Oh, by the way, but never mind. The reality is that polio has not been eradicated through the use and deployment of the vaccine. Polio has been nearly eradicated, except for those people who have received the vaccine, by, like every other infectious disease, better hygiene, and in the case of polio, the cessation of the use of DDT, a neurotoxin that causes ascending neurological paralysis, i.e., polio. And
Wow.
oh, by the way, the vaccine contains viruses, including the SV40 virus that causes leukemia, accounting for the leukemia epidemic in children. It also contains material that has been alleged to be the virus that causes polio, but the truth of the matter is that the polio virus has never been isolated. I'll take a moment to tell you the story of polio, so the next time somebody says, but what about polio? We eradicated polio through the use of the vaccine, you can tell them this. In order to say that something causes a disease, it must fulfill Koch's postulates, named after a scientist named Koch. And that means you have to isolate the agent, you have to recreate the disease in another organism, usually a laboratory animal. Then you have to re-isolate the offending organism and cause the disease, showing that the disease was caused by the organism, and the organism is present both before and after the creation of the new disease, after, or the disease in the new organism after injecting the offending agent. Okay, those are Koch's postulates. Well, what they did in polio was they took monkeys and they ground up their brains, rhesus monkeys, and they ground up their brains into a slurry, basically goop. And they injected that into the brains of other rhesus monkeys. And what do you know? The immune systems of the rhesus monkeys that received the goop began to attack their own nervous systems because they were now stimulated to do so by the injection that they had received. Then they developed the symptoms of ascending paralysis, polio. And they took that, the researchers took that as a sign that they had isolated an organism. They hadn't isolated an organism, they had caused a massive autoimmune response predictable by their desire to pretend that they had isolated the organism. Then they went ahead and made vast amounts of money on two things. One, the administration of the vaccine, good money, but not the mother load. The mother load was the diseases that follow. And we have the documentation that tell us that the whole point of vaccination profits is realized in the aftermarket: cancer, cardiovascular disease, stroke, diabetes, obesity, MS, and infertility, and on and on and on. We are talking about a cynical evil, just as cynical as GMOs and depopulation through GMOs, illness through GMOs, and the Uber cartel. So the next time somebody says to you, but we wiped out polio through the polio vaccine, you tell them the truth. Now, we have no choice but to defend ourselves against these forces. Oh, I'm sorry, we do have a choice. We can die. Those are our two choices. And let's not forget that vaccine programs are not just for children, as I've been telling you for a long time. They focus on the children, they render them ill and infertile and dead. And then, my friends, they're coming for us. They're coming for the adults. And the flu vaccine is just the beginning. If you go to the ACIP, the Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices of the CDC, you will find that there is an adult vaccine schedule, and it is equally horrifying. I'd like our attorney friends, Patricia Finn and Ralph Fusatola, my co-hosts, to comment on adult vaccine schedules.
Well, you know, that's the famous case. 1903, was it, Counsel? The Jacobson case in Massachusetts, which held that if an adult who was required to get the flu vaccine, there was a flu pandemic going on, allegedly, if the person was required to get it and they refused, they could be fined. In that case, $5, which in today's money would be, I guess, about $50. Not forced to take the vaccine, mind you, but fined. Supreme Court said, we're not going to interfere with the state government's decision to do that. But, the Supreme Court said, but if it was shown that the vaccine could be harmful to the person, the courts would not be without power to intervene. The question now is, I mean, forget about that caveat in that decision. The vaccine pushers forget about that. The question is, has science now progressed to the point where it can be said that it is proven that vaccines can be dangerous to the individual and therefore the courts should intervene? What do you think, Counsel Finn?
Well, that's so interesting, Ralph. I'll tell you, brilliant minds think alike, because my entire practice and every single thing that we've ever done has gone after Jacobson versus Massachusetts. The Fourth Circuit held in Workman versus Mingo that the state could exercise its police power to make Jacobson inject. And most courts today, in nearly all of the opinions, and not all of them have been disfavorable. I mean, we do win, and we've won a lot of important findings and holdings are helping to shape the law. But it does seem that the court heavily relies on Jacobson, and there's two real big problems there. First of all, Jacobson involved a criminal statute. The right that he was fined $5 for refusing because he and his son had come ill when they were injected with the vaccine. But the other really frightening part of a court relying on a holding in Jacobson versus Massachusetts is that they're comparing the aggressive vaccination schedule in the United States, children and adults, to what Jacobson was 100 years ago. It is so inappropriate and inapplicable because the science in and of itself makes Jacobson an obsolete case.
And moreover, isn't it true that Jacobson was during an emergency? I mean,
that's always a subject of debate too.
Yeah.
Talking about outbreaks of disease. Well, one or two, something is not an outbreak.
Right.
Kids in Queens that we're representing in the district court here in New York that have been put out of school on more than one occasion because some companion or other student in another part of the school may have exhibited a sign of chickenpox or pertussis or something like that. And yes, they are very serious diseases, but they are not outbreaks because one child gets it.
Right.
So,
very interesting.
That is very, very interesting. Jacobson's a bear, and I write about Jacobson a lot, and I think about that case, and of Jacobson going to continue to fight this battle. Once we put Jacobson aside, the due process clause will protect Americans and others who do not want to vaccinate. And the other problem, too, is that you have all these artificial market forces at work when it comes to vaccines. Manufacturers are shielded from liability, so there's no incentive to create a safe product.
That is something that Dr. King has reminded us many times. And, of course, there are only two technologies in our society that are treated that way. Two of what General Burt Stubblebine has identified as the genome-acidal technologies, and they are vaccines and nuclear power, neither of which would exist in a market economy because, of course, the rule in a market economy is that publicly traded companies may not invest in uninsurable risks, and both vaccines and nuclear power are uninsurable risks in which the crony corporatists have been given a blank check on all of our lives. Outrageous. Counsel, doctor, it is now 11 o'clock. We are halfway through our program. This is a moment for us to take our usual mid-program break. I'm bringing you our radiological weather report. I have been running my Geiger counter since the program started. It is averaging here indoors in New Jersey 0.1 microsieverts per hour. That is about 10% higher than the readings were a few weeks ago. Of course, we were without power in this house for 12 days, and that meant that my HEPA filter was not running for 12 days. And so we have a 10% increase in the ambient radiation, if you will, here. We can give you a report, folks, about the radiation levels in other areas as well, because Dr. Rima and General Burt and I just came back to our various abodes from 9 days in my case 9 days, they were there a couple of days longer, in Los Angeles at an extraordinary, amazing master's communicator course that we all took. I haven't been in school for a long time, and being there from 7 in the morning till 7 at night for 9 days was quite an experience. I took more notes than I've taken in a very long time, and I think I learned a lot. But we also had our Geiger counters with us. And folks, if you're in Los Angeles, I have to give you the report. And I think we need to set the basis for it. Dr. Rima has been running her Geiger counter in Santiago de Chile, southern hemisphere, deep southern hemisphere. And her readings are generally in the neighborhood of 0.04 microsieverts, 4/100ths of 1 microsievert. That's sort of the background of the planet after nuclear testing, but before Fukushima. Well, the readings I've been getting here in New Jersey mostly have been in the 0.09, 9/100ths of 1%, almost 1/10 of 1% of a microsievert. And by the way, folks, a little bit above 0.1%, and you're getting into territory in which some people would say, many would say, is not safe. So we're on the
Well,
edge.
no. Let me
Go ahead.
clarify that. Uh, Background radiation is artificially considered to be safe. That is to say, pre-Fukushima background radiation, basically because the governments couldn't do anything about it, so they said, okay, we'll make that safe. There is no safe dose of radiation. We get a small amount of radiation from the natural breakdown and nuclear decay of the isotopes in our environment, and there's nothing we can do about that. And we have a small capacity to repair DNA and membrane damage in order to allow us to live in an environment where there is a small amount of nuclear decay and breakdown. Anything above that begins to exceed our ability to repair ourselves and gets us into serious trouble. And it's important to remember that it's not just cancer that is caused by ionizing radiation. Every organ, the brain, the heart, the kidneys, the GI tract, the lungs, every organ is susceptible to damage from ionizing radiation. There is no safe dose. Artificially, the United States government has sort of made up irrational numbers, and they say, well, 0.14 millionths of a sievert is the upper limit of acceptable radiation. And the question is, acceptable to whom and acceptable for what?
Right.
There is no reason to think that 0.14 millionths of a sievert is good for you, or that you are going to flourish and thrive in that level of radiation. So Ralph is saying that right now his background radiation is 0.1, which is slightly under the alleged safe dose, upper limit of safe. There is no upper limit of safe. It's all toxic. That's
absolutely. It all causes, as you've pointed out to us all, genome disruption. But it's there, and we have to try to figure out what we're measuring. And of course, when I go to my HEPA filter and put my Geiger counter up on it, it exceeds that dose of 0.14 by several times. It gets up to 2.2, 0.3. But what is it doing in Los Angeles?
Well, there's another issue. Ambient air is one thing.
Right.
But food concentrates minerals.
Right.
The reason food nourishes you is in large part because it gives you minerals in a bioactive form. So when you measure the air, you're getting whatever wafts by at that particular moment in terms of hot particles. But when you measure food, you're getting a concentrated, stabilized clumping of minerals, of radioactive things. I did a video for the teacher of this course that Ralph and General Burt and Gail Koba, our executive director, and I took, this 9-day course, which was grueling and very, very worthwhile. He had just eaten an egg white omelet, and he had the container that he had eaten it from, because he had someone bring him food that was good for his particular diet in his hotel room. And so I stuck the Geiger counter on top of the empty container, which had, little bits, little debris of his previous meal. And the Geiger counter instantly went to 0.292. And we're talking about a disastrous radiological input. And he said, but they're organic eggs. Doesn't matter.
Well, that was in Los Angeles, and of course, that's what we found out, that the readings in Los Angeles are notably higher. 0.14, 0.209, I saw at one point. Rima says 0.29. These are 6 times what's going on in Santiago de Chile, 3 times what's going on the East Coast. So be warned on the West Coast. I don't want to take too much time from our topic today, to talk about that, but I thought, we have to,
No.
it's important to give that information. And Dr. Rima, it's also time right now for our sponsor. I'm putting the Valley of the Moon coffee banner on the screen for those who are watching us on the high bandwidth. And I ask you to tell us what's been going on with the coffee. And if you want to talk a little bit about green coffee. Good.
The new crop is coming in. The first roastings of the new crop are taking place. Panama is giving us black gold. It is the most delicious, most spectacular coffee. I'm in Panama right now. I'm not in Chile, actually. And I came here to do an inspection tour and an oversight of our activities in Panama. And then I'll be leaving for Chile on the 16th. The coffee is even better, and I didn't think it was possible for it to be better. Now that's a cup of health. High antioxidant, delicious, no chemicals, no GMOs, only the chemicals that God and nature conspire to put into
we
coffee.
just lost Pat. Hold on a second. Yeah.
Okay. Valley of the Moon coffee.org. Get some, give some, make it your Christmas gift, make it your corporate gift. Make it your coffee of choice. You're helping yourself and you're helping health freedom. Meanwhile, Ralph is attempting to get Counsel Finn back on our show.
I think we may have her back.
Excellent.
By the way,
Are
folks,
you
Pat, you there?
Power surge here.
Power surge. Hey, we got our power back on yesterday after 12 days off. Let me tell you, folks, my family's involuntary 19th century reenactment was wearing thin, even though our generator gave us some link to the universe, kept our water pump going and a few other things, and kept us on the internet. Being back on the grid is a pleasure. One of my Amish clients called while I was off the grid. I'm working with groups of Amish men who want to form clinics in New York, Pennsylvania, and Ohio so that the plain people don't have to go anywhere near emergency rooms in the future. They know what's coming. They are preppers to the max. And the gentleman chuckled when I told him about being involuntarily off the grid, and he said to me, "Oh, we've been doing that for centuries." And then we discussed very seriously how they're going to get their clinic off the grid. I mean, their farms are already off the grid, and that doesn't mean that they're not adopting some modern techniques. If you go to Miller's Natural Foods in Bird in Hand, PA, you'll see that the grid stops on the property line, but the natural food store, which is a wonderful store, by the way, has a cold room in it for the raw cheese and other things. And that cold room is kept cold, power generated by solar panels on the roof of the building. So they're not, they're ready. Anyway, I'm sorry, I've lost my train of thought. I wanted to bring us back to, that's right. Watch in the future, folks. The Valley of the Moon coffee is about to get really interesting. We are exploring the benefits of green coffee, the benefits of coffee as a dietary supplement. We're exploring the benefits of what's called the coffee honey, which is the sweet liqueur that's inside the coffee berry that surrounds the coffee beans, a very powerful antioxidant. There's going to be something coming up soon, something called Dr. Rima's Own, and it's going to be very, very interesting. You're going to be ready for an exciting new health product. That's all I'm going to say about it, because it's going to take a few months for it to happen. And with that teaser, let us return to talking about the assault on the human race known as vaccination. Where are we going next? We've begun this campaign, folks. We've begun a campaign. 1 million vaccine refusers. Would 1 million vaccine refusers be enough? No, that would be a start. We know that 3,500,000 emails from our organization, who knows how many or more from others, to congressmen and state legislators about the swine flu vaccine back in 2009, and it was millions, by the way, over a short period of time. We're talking, I think it was 14 days, basically collapsed a very elaborate plan. And it's well worth going back and talking about that plan because it identifies the methodology. If you'll recall, there was a lot of propaganda about this new swine flu, a new dangerous, potentially pandemic mutation. And the U.S. government spent $6.4 billion and bought the entire output, vaccine output of 5 drug companies, including the live mist vaccine. These vaccines were then approved by the FDA, and then they were recommended by the CDC. It's all the same actors playing, of course, with their different hats. And then the state government started to mandate the use of these dangerous vaccines. Understand why I'm saying dangerous. They were not tested for safety. On one hand, out of one side of its mouth, the federal government said, novel virus with pandemic potential. And on the other side of its mouth, it was saying, mere change of strain, no need to safety test. With this double talk, the great white father talks with forked tongue, as usual. With this double talk going on, the state governments started to mandate. And that's when Patty Finn came in. That's when we came in. That's when we all went to various courts and we started to bombard decision makers with our clear statement that we were not going to take it. We weren't going to do it. And they, for example, in Boston, they announced, oh, there are not enough vaccine shots to go around. You must show up on Sunday at such and such a time. And they had locations all around the city, and they had 100,000 or 300,000 shots, and a couple of thousand people showed up. It went on like that, and the whole structure collapsed. What if it hadn't collapsed? What if people had begun to panic and line up for the shots? Well, Secretary of HHS Sebelius told Congress in open testimony that we've shown the world that exactly what the plan was. She said, we don't have enough shots to go around, and we're going to have to stretch the supply. And our own scientists will not sign off on the adjuvant needed to stretch the supply. And then she said, but if there were a national health emergency, we would be able to do that. And of course, the president signed the emergency notice a few days later. So they were prepared, according to Sebelius's plan.
But then, Ralph, didn't
Yes.
they end up burning the millions of doses?
Oh, better burn them than use them, let me tell you.
No, it was, but it did fly in the face of the supply issue. I mean, here in New York, New York was the first state, I think, to mandate that healthcare workers
Right.
get the vaccine, and that was really, I mean, I had...
And that would have been the live virus version, because that's the first one that was available.
Right, and the military, the soldier, Sean Nemi, that I represented, his troop, he was the medic for his troop deployed, I think, in Afghanistan, and he was told to inject his platoon with the vaccine, and he refused to do so. There was no insert. It was labeled experimental. It was actually different, or supposedly...
That had the squalene in it.
Pardon?
I think that probably had the squalene adjuvant. What do you think, Dr. Rima? It was
Yes, I
labeled
believe it did.
Yeah, and of course, that was the whole plan there. I mean, imagine this, folks. At 90,000 locations around the country, nurses were going to mix the squalene, the adjuvant.
No. Nurses and others, not necessarily nurses.
Wow.
Could be school principals, could be EMTs, could be moms, could be policemen, could be anybody.
Could be the Dalai Lama.
Could be the Dalai Lama.
Right, and they were going to mix this in these non-sterile locations in order to stretch the vaccine, and they were going to mix in a deadly poison in order to force an immune system overdrive reaction. This would have been the start of the pandemic. It would have been getting people ready for medicine-mediated megadeath. And you all out there stopped it. You stopped it by becoming, at least for that one time, vaccine refusers. Now it's time to
It was a
become
great
vaccine refusers for
time
all.
in our movement. That really was a real important pushback, something in my life that I had never seen. And it was very, very impressive. The New York State healthcare workers, or the nurses in particular that were coming to us, they were absolutely not going to inject the vaccine, and their unions were not going to help them. And unfortunately, we're a small firm. We don't have a lot of resources, and it was a very difficult case. I mean, the phone was ringing off the wall. Ralph, that's when you and I met.
Right.
Well, that's when we became much closer and began to work more closely on this subject. But here in New York, what we did once again, looking at basic elements of due process, had to figure out what was the easiest and fastest way to attack it. And we didn't even go on a constitutional ground. We brought a very simple lawsuit called an Article 78 proceeding, and we basically said, right or wrong, that the Commissioner of Health could not force licensed nurses in New York State.
Yeah, no, this is really, we're reaching. I believe we're reaching a major breaking point in this issue and other issues. I believe that the elite will push as hard as they can. All of the recent efforts to change the laws in various states, all of these are a response to the pushback from that event. I believe to a very great extent.
Well, I know for me personally, that after that lawsuit that I handled, and the mandate was withdrawn in New York, all of a sudden I started getting charged with advertising violations,
right,
and being accused of lying about the number of kids I represented, and just all of a sudden my firm was raided. And it continues to be rated, and it went on for a long, long time until February of this year when, I was formally charged. And I will tell you that I was charged with an adjective. I used the word downgraded to describe a court order, and I was charged with misconduct. And I was also charged with misconduct for filing the Article 78 proceeding that I was just telling you about. I filed an Article 78 proceeding, which is an exercise of due process. And, it had been going on for a long time, and it was pounding away at me. And then finally, I went public, and the confidentiality of these disciplinary matters, they were not protecting me. They were protecting the people harassing me. And when I went public, the whole thing collapsed. And again,
right.
I don't know what it has to do with science. I don't know if...
You've just made a really major point, Counsel Finn, and that is that these nefarious behaviors cannot stand the light of day. The statistician at the World Bank talks to his colleagues, but in the modern world, those words are on the internet a day later. You can't hide the secrets that they would like to maintain, the secrecy that they need to impose this eugenicidal agenda. Once it's broken, I mean, what can they do? They can throw the general out. They can attack the lawyer. They can, at one point, 4 of the 5 leading female holistic physicians in New York State were all delicensed at the same time over the same 1-year period.
Well, I know for me too. It was an awful assault. I was always being asked every word I said, every public appearance I made. There were attackers. Some of them, I believe, were pharmaceutical plants that were, trolling the internet, attacking my work. Falsely accusing me. Bill Gates has funded money for anti-surveillance efforts, and I'm told I'm on the top of his list. Um, but these things were really frightening, and most lawyers try to hush that stuff up and don't want anything. I had nothing to hide. I've done nothing wrong. I went public with it, and when I swung back, it broke open like a glass jaw. And here I am 9 months later, still practicing law. With more business than ever. And I'm not saying that we're in this for money making, because clearly we are not.
I understand that one.
You know,
Let me tell you.
we are working.
Oh yeah.
And we're doing amazing things. Where I represent Nicole Matten and her child. Her poor child died last Christmas.
Oh, that's...
After getting a flu vaccine. I'm representing the Caviezel family against the Great Neck School District. I represented Army medic Sean Nemi, who...
Dr. Rima, that comment just led me to a thought. Do you think that children with special needs, Down syndrome children and the like, are more susceptible to vaccine injury than healthy children are? If there are any healthy children left outside the Amish community? They already have genome disruption of a sort.
No, not of a sort. They already have a disrupted genome. My assumption, and this is not based on data, but my assumption is that the more disrupted the genome is, the more easily further disrupted the genome is. And I would recommend that people go to www.gds-therapy.com and download the free GDS white paper. Your genome is under attack. That's how the genomicidal technologies operate. Vaccines are a genomicidal technology. They change the nature, configuration, and content of your genes. So do genetically modified foods. So do chemicals that give you diseases. The genome is the controlling mechanism. Your DNA is very precious. And if kids or people already have genome disruption, whether it's showing up as a trisomy 21 in a Down syndrome person or some other genome disruption, then I would assume it's even easier for the rest of their genome to be impacted. However, understand Ralph's comment, which he laughed about and went on to rapidly past, when he said, are there any healthy kids other than Amish kids left? And the answer is very serious. The answer is probably no, because pretty much everybody's eating genetically modified food. Pretty much everybody's eating industrial food. Pretty much everybody is being, even the Amish, are being exposed to chemtrails and their enormous dangers. Finely divided aluminum, beryllium, and the other metals that are being showered upon us, as well as synthetic DNA, are definitely not good for your genome. Pretty much everybody is being exposed one way or another to drugs and vaccines, or at least a lot of people are. The genome is under heavy assault. And therefore, I would say that not only people with Down syndrome, trisomy 21, but people in general are more susceptible now to accelerating genome disruption than they have been in the past, because we've got less of a solid base, a solid genomic base to stand on. We have more mutations, we have more disease, we have more disease younger, and that is a clear indication that our genome is under attack, which is why we have to take care of it. And one of the ways to take care of it, and most of you won't want to do this, you won't like it, but I'm going to tell you anyway, because that's what I do. And you can sort, sift, and separate and deal with what I say in any way you like. But if you really treasure your genome, your children's genome, your lifespan, and your health span, you will think about taking a step that in the United States we forgot was part of human life, and that is migration. You might want to think about getting out of an increasingly toxic world. And you might want to think about going to this still low radiation deep south of this planet, wherever that is for you. For me, it's Chile, so that we can create a food supply of low radiation food and bring it to those of you who are still in the northern hemisphere. And by the way, that is coming along absolutely beautifully. The harvest season is coming on in Chile, and we anticipate having our first food supply through the Friendly Food Co-op. It's a pretty exciting activity. But we are under assault, and we are, the point of assault is the genome. Now, Patty, I want to ask you, if I, from a legal standpoint, if I ingest a patented gene in a genetically modified PHUDE, fake food, and it gets woven into my genes, does the patent holder now own my genome because I am using its property?
Well, that is a most extraordinary question, and I would say that I don't know. I think that it's a matter of first impression and nothing that I've ever come across before. As I mentioned, typically I'm a very small firm. You know, I'm an independent attorney. I do have lawyers that work for me, but we are, not. We lack the resources of Merck Pharmaceuticals, Pfizer, the Attorney General, or any other person. It's a very, very lean operation, and I have purposely tried to avoid the medical and the science aspects of the vaccine or injection debate because I can't afford to take them on. I just simply can't do it. Our goal has always been from the other side. You know, I don't know if that is true, and if you are injected, if something happens to the genome, would it affect the patent holder? But my position has been and continues to be that if I don't want to inject into my body, you can't make me. And in doing so, it actually corrects all of these artificial market forces that are being hurled at us. Because if you can't force someone to inject vaccines and they are not safe, people are not going to use them, and then the market forces will simply drive the product away. And that's the number one approach that we've taken. So I can't really answer that question, although it is rather fascinating. But, my approach has been all along from the other side, really a basic 14th Amendment argument, due process. I don't want to shoot. I do not want to shoot up. I'm not going to, and you can't make me. And I think that is what corrects everything else. The kids won't be injected, the healthcare workers won't, and the pharmaceutical companies won't be making all the money they're making by having the government require its citizens to take these medications and vaccines. I am so sorry, though. I do have to run. It's 11:30, and I have to get to Mass this afternoon, and they're waiting for me at the door, my children here. So I am going to drop off, but I did have time for another question or comment if there's anything you needed from me. Otherwise, I have to bid you adieu at this time. You have another half hour in the show, right?
Yes. Thank you for stepping in so graciously. I love talking to you. Give us your contact information.
Oh, Dr. Rima, I love talking to you, too. And Ralph, I don't know what to say. Your friendship, your kindness, your legal mind has really been so helpful to me. You have no idea. Anyway, I can be reached at patriciafinnattorney@gmail.com. I also have a website, www.patriciafinnattorney.com. And, of course, I'm on Facebook, and if you're listening and you want to stop by Patricia Finn Attorney on Facebook, my contact information is there, and and you can read a little bit about me and my firm and my work and all the other good things that we're doing here in New York, trying to get over Sandy and move ahead. So I want to thank you both so much, and if you wouldn't mind, Dr. Rima, I'll take up that offer to come for a visit at least down in the southern.
And I would like to invite you to join my Facebook page, Save My Life, Dr. Rima, and I will join yours, Patricia Finn, attorney.
Oh, that sounds wonderful. All right, well, thank you both, and Ralph, thank you so much, and I'll be in touch soon, Ralph, with the litigation. And Dr. Rima, I can't thank you enough. I'll talk to you both soon.
Thank you, Patricia.
Okay, bye-bye.
You know, it is so wonderful. It is so awe-inspiring. It is so strengthening to have colleagues who, of course, become friends, to have colleagues like Patty Finn. She's a brave woman, she's a smart woman, and she's doing our work each time she brings a case before the courts to force our rights into the, if you will, into the public domain. Because as Ralph can test, Ralph, are you? Ralph? Yeah. Ralph. Yes, get rid of that business. That setting. Ralph, I think Ralph must have stepped away for a moment. He will be back. Okay, Ralph. As Ralph can attest, the work that happens in the courtroom sets precedents and forces the configuration of enforcement, if you will, into a different shape. Each case that we win or that we lose and then appeal changes the reality of what the government can do. The legal aspect is unbelievably important. I can't begin to tell you how much power we have when we have the funding to take cases into court. Now, the Natural Solutions Foundation has brought 3 cases against the FDA into court, into federal court, about vaccines, about the fact that they are unsafe and untested and therefore violate U.S. law. And we won each of those cases. This was around the H1N1 swine flu vaccine. We won each of those 3 cases. The problem was that the judge ruled in our favor, but ruled so narrowly that in order to get the victory that we want, which is to get the vaccines off the shelves and out of the marketplace, out of our bodies, we would have to go back to court again and again and again and again and again. And frankly, we simply, even with Ralph as our lead attorney, and of course Ralph is not charging us attorney's fees, even with that, there are still significant costs to go into federal court, which is where these cases have to be tried. And we simply were not able to pursue that strategy. We didn't have the money. Why don't we have the money? Because people think that it's not their responsibility to donate. It is their responsibility to donate. Let me be very clear. It's your responsibility to donate. $5 a month, $10 a month. What's your freedom worth to you? Who else is doing this for you? And if you're not going to www.savemylifedrrima.com and donating, or helpfreedomusa.org and donating, you're not doing your job. Doesn't have to be much, but it's your battle. We're fighting your battle. Help us fight your battle. Help us have the resources necessary to take this battle as far as it needs to go. And right now, make a pledge. How much are you going to do for the vaccine refuser issue? How many people are you going to guide to the point where they take the vaccine refusers pledge and further pledge to get a certain number of people? 5 people? You feel that you can get 5 people to go to tinyurl.com vaccine refuser and take the vaccine refusers pledge, great. Get 5 people and get a commitment from them that they will each get 5 or 10 or 20 to take the pledge. The importance of it cannot be overestimated. Ralph,
Yes. Let's talk about what? I'm sorry.
Let's talk about pushback.
Indeed.
Let's talk about a vaccine refuser's million-person pushback. What would happen if 1 million people say, oh, by the way, when you take the vaccine refusers pledge, what you do is ride your Freedom Mouse to send the fact that you have taken the vaccine refusers pledge to your state legislators, to the governor of your state, and to your national legislators. So your congressmen and your representatives and your state legislators, your governor, the head of the CDC, and the head of the Health and Human Services, as well as the White House. Those are the targets. You click the button, and we send it off. And you don't have to pay us for that. It would be nice if you make a donation to help cover our costs, which are significant. But the point is, we are telling all of the legislators who touch your life and the regulators who touch your life on this issue, no, I am a vaccine refuser. Now, that's powerful. 1 million, and then another million, and then another million. And by the way, Parsley, I love to read your comments, but this week you have a gray line on my screen and a very, very pale green line, green text, and I can't read a single word that you're writing, so I'm missing all of Parsley 123's comments and intervention, which is sad. So if you could change your font color, it would be wonderful. Anyway, back to what's happening. That's going on the healthfreedomportal.org site, which is our chat site. Now, Ralph, let's talk about what happens when 1 million emails come into a state legislator and to a governor and to and to the CDC.
The way their email systems work is that when they see when their staff sees a lot of emails coming in on a topic, they set up a separate folder, and the emails automatically go to that folder. Do they get read? Well, sometimes a few of them get read by the staff, but mostly the staff keeps track of the numbers. And the state or federal legislator gets regular reports from his staff members or her staff members as to what the current active issues are. What issues are still getting emails? Not that there was a 24-hour blitz and now it's gone and it's 2 weeks later and nobody is mentioning it, but what issues are consistently getting emails? What are the issues that are consistently on people's minds? That's why we say you need to send and resend these action items over and over again. That's
send them for every member of your family.
Indeed.
And that's absolutely legitimate. You've got 3 kids and 2 aunts and a grandmother, as well as yourself and your spouse living in the house. Send one for each person. This is legitimate. This is important. Your 8-month-old baby can't send one for herself, but you're concerned about her health, send one for her. Now, if you have time and can send it on a daily basis, how much better. But you can get your friends and your neighbors and your colleagues and your relatives and your business contacts alerted, and you can take responsibility for getting a lot of these emails out. Is it important? Well, I don't know. How important is your life? You decide. And I would ask you the same question about your donations. Is health freedom important? I don't know. How important is your life? Who else is doing this for you? Why wouldn't you make a contribution? Why wouldn't you embrace health freedom as part of your life? You have a tight economic situation? Indeed. However, you can take a small amount of money every month and send it for the most important purchase you can make, your life and your freedom.
Indeed. One of the posters said, "Well, if all these elitists are genocidalists, why don't they just kill themselves and do the world a favor?"
I have written that I believe that the depopulationists have a point, so they should demonstrate the practical aspect of that point for us by going first. Somehow, they never seem to take that on as their personal responsibility.
Indeed. Well, folks, we have about 15 minutes left in the program. First of all, let me again thank Counsel Finn for being with us, taking away time that she was intending to work on her briefs. By the way, Patty, when you finish the draft, if you want to email me a copy, I'd be happy to give you my 2 cents worth on any of the briefs that you're doing. I think that the work you're doing is so important. The willingness that you have to be in the trenches is so central to what needs to be done, that I certainly want to help as much as I can. So please let me help. Now, in the last 15 minutes, where do you want the discussion to go, folks? Where do we? What do the people on the chat want discussed? We know we have a campaign that we need to start. We know that, I'm sure, we'll get Leslie Both on in a couple of weeks, and the Women's Health Freedom Coalition will make the million vaccine refusers movement a reality. But, what we have to really do is start planning for the 10 million vaccine refusers. That's what we have to start doing. We got to go to 1 million. How many do we have now? Truth Radio. I'm going to go into that website while Dr. Rima talks a bit, and I'll tell you how many we have now.
I'd like to talk to you about your genome. I'd like to talk to you about a new book that I am writing, and we'll be finished with this book fairly soon. As soon as I get back to Chile on the 16th, my first job will be to sit down at my desk and finish the book, which is, I would estimate, between 80 and 85% completed. The book is called Read This Book or Die Prematurely. And that's really the choice that you have. Of course, reading the book is not magic. You have to employ the simple strategies that I give you, which are easy and inexpensive and available to you if you choose to regulate your life and extend your health span. Health span is a very interesting concept. I don't see much point in living, drooling, and out of awareness in a nursing home for 112 years. I see no point in that. I would like to have a vital, lively possession of my faculties and my abilities up until the moment that I leave this level of reality. And I intend to do that. Wait, Parsley says, my question was, if I go through immigration in an airport, if I sign that document that goes to my legislators, will they have me down as a vaccine refuser? The answer is no. While I imagine that could happen at some time in the future, the answer is no. If you sign a pledge as a vaccine refuser, you can go through the airport absolutely unimpeded.
And indeed, since the pledge itself is actually in the form of an email that goes to your state legislators and federal legislators, you are communicating with your representatives. This is clearly a First Amendment protected communication. And
then Parsley goes on to say, this could affect being led into certain foreign countries. Not sure I want to come out as a vaccine refuser as I travel a lot. No, there are a couple of serious misconceptions here, and I'm so glad you changed your font colors so that I could read the question and respond to it. There are countries that require you to have various vaccines, and therefore you're supposed to present a yellow vaccination card, which you're supposed to carry with you. And that vaccination card says, for example, that you have been vaccinated against yellow fever if you are going into Ghana or going into South Africa from Ghana It says that you have been vaccinated against this and that other disease if you're going into a specific country that requires them. Every single country in the world, without exception, will accept an exemption letter from a physician. And for example, I travel with an exemption letter when I go to those countries that require yellow fever vaccination. And by the way, the World Health Organization says that people over 60 should never take the yellow fever vaccine because 9% of them will die from yellow fever within 30 days. And it's an astonishing 16 additional percent will die from multi-system organ failure within 30 days. Therefore, we're looking at 25% of the people over age 60 who take the yellow fever vaccine dying from the vaccine directly. Not a good idea. So even the World Health Organization says don't do that one if you're over 60. So if you're over 60, as I am, and you want to go to one of these yellow fever vaccine countries, you carry in your document case, which you have with you on the airplane, a letter from a licensed physician in whatever country you choose that says so-and-so is advised, I have advised so-and-so not to take the yellow fever vaccine on the basis of a medical condition that renders it a hazardous procedure for her, or some such language. You present it to the customs person, the immigration person, who may not be able to read English. Doesn't matter. They'll get somebody who speaks English, and then they will say, oh, okay, you have an exemption. You don't have to take the vaccine. Now, if you don't come out as a vaccine refuser, you have to present a vaccination card, the yellow card. That yellow card shows the lot number of what you've been vaccinated with. Now, you're traveling a lot, but you're risking your life for the sake of the World Health Organization's pharmaceutical masters, because the World Health Organization gets about 70% of its funding from the pharmaceutical industry and does their bidding, just as the FDA does. So we're talking about putting your body and your life at risk and not taking a stance that in no way impedes your ability to travel. I'm glad that you asked this question. It's a very important one. And then there's another point. Okay, so you have a vaccine card with the lot and date of your vaccination for this and this and this and this and this and this and this, and you've put your body at risk, and you've increased your chances of Alzheimer's and cancer and stroke and heart disease and infertility and so on, and you get to travel. Is that really what you want? Or do you really want to own your body and travel with a body that can be safe and healthy and claim your rights? It's a personal choice. I travel. I don't know of anybody who travels as much as I do. I travel to every country in the world to which I wish to go without restriction, and I have never been barred entry. I don't take any vaccines, but I do have exemption letters.
Indeed. In fact, when you travel with Dr. Rima and General Burt, it's always an adventure because, of course, the doctor, rightly so, says, no, you cannot use those full body scanners. And so we all opt out. Well, General Burt always is an object of special attention anyway, but we opt out and get our TSA massage instead. By the way, Dr. Rima, my flight out and my flight back, no, there are no full body scanners being used.
Well, they're taking them offline because they're almost impossible to maintain, and the hazard to the workers who stand next to them, the TSA agents, is now irrefutable. So after spending billions and billions of dollars on these pornography devices called full body scanners, they have decided, oops, that was a bad idea. Well, we did tell them that it was a bad idea right from the get-go when they were proposing them. Argentina 2 years ago, and from the where was I? From Panama. And I called the airport in Buenos Aires, and I said, do you use full body scanners, either in or out? They said, of course not. I said, what do you mean, of course not? They said, that's a U.S. thing. They don't work. They don't detect anything. They're ridiculous. They're dangerous. Why would we use them? I said, good point. See you soon. This is part of the, and by the way, people 60 years and over are particularly susceptible to the cancer-causing impact of these devices. So if you are traveling with or without vaccines, and that's a bad idea to accept the vaccines, if you are traveling, always tell them that you opt out. If they are using full body scanners, the ones where you walk in, you turn sideways, you hold your hands above your head, and you get irradiated. Full body irradiation, full body scanner, bad idea. It's also part of the eyes down, shuffle forward, don't ask questions training that Americans are being exposed
to. Do you mean we're being subject to mind control through all of these technologies? By the way, Dr. Rima, 7 minutes left on the show. Patty Finn may or may not be with us still. I know she has to go.
No, she has left, Ralph. She
okay.
has to leave. But one of the people, actually two of our friends in Chile, Lawrence and Jim, just came on, and they said, is the show being archived? Did we ever get the
yes. Now I don't know how long it's been on, but I noticed the recording button and the little flashing red light has been going for some time. How long? I don't know.
Okay.
Interesting stuff.
Excellent. So, Parsley, you don't have to worry about coming out as a vaccine refuser. And I'm reminded of one of the songs from The Sound of Music. The officer whom Maria von Trapp eventually marries says, I will not bow my head to the men I despise. And the guy who's trying to get him to cooperate with the Nazis says, you don't have to bow your head, just stoop a little. And that's how it goes.
Yeah.
You don't have to bow your head, just stoop a little. You stoop a little and you stoop a little more, and pretty soon you're stupid and stupefied. If we are not willing to take a stand now, there will be no ground on which to take a stand later. Let me say that again. If you are not willing to take a stand now, there will be no ground on which to take a stand later. We are facing a battle for our lives. We are facing a battle for our very existence. The H1N1 vaccine, which our 3.5 million emails pushed off the table so that millions of doses which supposedly did not exist were burned because nobody would take them. That vaccine was to be mixed with squalene. The United States government, let me remind you, holds 2 patents, and those patents show that squalene at the precise level that was to have been mixed into the vaccine causes, and I quote, irreversible immune-mediated infertility. It was a population reduction maneuver to make you and your children sterile. And we said, not only no, but hell no. And they backed off. Now, if you don't take a stand, there will be no ground on which to stand later. Am I exaggerating? No, I am not. I asked Hesperidan to look up the documents that say that IMF loans equal a pledge to depopulate. And he went online and he found a number of links which are currently available on Ustream and on healthfreedomportal.org. Documents easily available which say depopulation is the order of the day. And do you think that you and your children are part of the privileged few, the capos who will be spared, the neo-aristocrats? Hell no. You and I, we are the useless eaters. If that's okay with you, don't take a stand. If it's not okay with you, the line is in the sand, and it's vaccines, and it's now or not.
This has got to be the most serious campaign we've ever tried. We need the people on the radio show this Sunday to be the starting point. And we're going to move the spearhead. Now, we sent out the e-blast late last night. 500 people have actually taken the pledge. We need 2,000 times that many in order to get ourselves in the position of having those million people. But we can do it. We've done it before. Let's do
a little exponential. Let's do a little exponential mathematics. 500 people each get 10 people. Now we've got 50,000 people, and each of those 50,000 people each get 10 people. Now we've got 500,000 people, and each of them each get 10 people. Now we've got 5 million people. How hard is that?
That's just 3 levels, basically. 3 iterations of 10 people each. We're going to make it a lot easier. We're going to make it easier to get to that web page. We're going to be upgrading the web page. We worked a bit on it last night to make it easier to use. We want to make sure that people can go to it. The tiny URL is always a little difficult to use, so we're going to see if we can get ourselves another URL that'll be simpler, that will link directly to the page. So we want to really make it as easy as possible for this campaign to work. There's 2 minutes left in the program. I think
and this campaign has to work.
Right. There's no choice. Exactly. There are 2, maybe the 2 most critical. Of the 5, who knows which are the most critical. Let's remember what the 5 technologies are. Nuclear power, vaccines and drug toxins, industrial and food toxins, chemtrails, and number 5, GMOs. GMOs by themselves. Those 5 big lies, and if you go to SaveMyLifeDrRima.com, you'll see the 5 doors down toward the bottom of the page. And those 5 doors now open into, or begin to open into, all the information. Our Health Freedom USA site is a bit confusing. We're going to try to simplify it by Save My Life, Dr. Rima, by organizing this into the 5 big lies and the solutions. And that's why Dr. Rima has defined genome disruption syndrome, a concept that we can use to understand what's going on our planet. And therefore, Dr. Rima, your last words before the bumper music.
This is your battle. This is your life. Take a stand. Get active. If you're willing to be free, you have to be willing to be active. And you need to donate a small amount of money, or a large one, to healthfreedomusa.org or SaveMyLifeDrRima.com. It's about saving your life. Take action or pay the price. I am so glad to be involved in this struggle at this time, because we will win. We have no choice. I rely on you to be my colleague in freedom. Thank you for being with us.
There is no logical alternative, and we will be back next Sunday. Next Sunday.
Shredding the Constitution.